Hola.
Good afternoon. I want to begin by thanking the organizers, to the municipal government of Rio and Milan for organizing this global forum at the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact Forum. And in this session, the work by our teams from Belo Horizonte and Rosario for organizing the regional forum of the Milan Pact here in South America, and all the participants for your interest, and the mayors and the authorities for your dedication in promoting food and climate justice. We're celebrating this high-level meeting in South America, and we're here to hear and to discuss topics which are the heart of public policies that we are committed to in the Milan Pact. So to discuss the progress and difficulties for transform food programs with climate justice and food security, and a South American agenda to accelerate processes of transformation, the urban food systems with climate justice and community involvement with a focus, human rights focus, and from a gender perspective. We're also here to empower exchange of good practices that are replicable, respecting diversity and territorial specificities as well. We're here this afternoon in this high-level forum to shed a light on the progress to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and the needs for technical assistance and financial assistance to scale up in virtual public policies. In the year 2022, this year, we have a pandemic still proceeding in several different places. We also have war and armed conflict with global warming and climate change, with phenomena related to an increase in commodity prices, which accentuates inequalities and international tensions, and all of this affects food security globally. Although we've made progress in building a better world, too many people are still being left behind. To put an end to hunger is not only a matter of supply. We produce enough food here to feed everyone on the planet. So we should also talk about waste, food waste. According to a report that we have some figures, but we have 20 to 40% of food that is produced is wasted, 20 to 40%. So this is another problem that we should attack with public policies dedicated to avoiding food waste. I believe that we should discuss the nutritional quality of the foods that we are producing increasingly, as was said this morning. Increasingly, there is evidence that there are many foods which are produced currently don't have enough vitamins and nutrients as 100 years ago or several decades ago. Don't have as many vitamins or nutrients. The root of the process of the problem is modern agricultural process increasing yields, but disturbing the soil's health, and this is a problem with climate change and an increase in CO2 levels, which are also leading to reduction into the nutrient content of fruits and vegetables and grains. The sustainable food systems are the one that guarantee food security and nutrition for everyone without jeopardizing the foundations, economic, social, and environmental foundations for future generations. We need to build a sustainable world where everyone, everywhere, has access, regular, sufficient access to nutritive foods. No one should be left behind. So let's elaborate on this high-level forum and collaborate in this panel that we're going to be hearing presentations to discuss these themes and exchanging experiences and proposing ideas to continue to propose food policies that are committed to the 2030 agenda. The high-level session of the South American Regional Forum of the Milan Pact, it has reached a crucial moment, to propose a link which we intend to be historic for Latin America. We're placing on the table we have the signatory cities for the Milan Pact here sitting at the same table to communicate with each other and linking for now and for the future. The connection between cities and between everyone in the pact to lead food security policies. The objective of this meeting now is for us to have progress not only from the technical point of view in implementing public policies, but also for us to be able to organize movements towards political will that was discussed this morning, and through our coordination to discuss agendas and lead agendas in the theme United Together, established here amongst us, promoted by the structuring of this pact. I want to invite, therefore, our chair, who is to come up to the stage. Maria Carrascosa is the technical director, the coordinator of agro-ecology in Spain, and all of the guest speakers of the signatory cities to take their spaces here on the stage as agreed on before. I hope that we have an excellent meeting now and that we can leave here with great results, not only to present tomorrow in the global coordination of the pact, but also for us to be able to lead together food security policies which are increasingly sustainable, environmentally responsible, and inclusive and well developed. So thank you very much. Okay, can you hear me? Great, good afternoon. First of all, I wish to thank Belo Horizonte and Rosario for having helped me in the network of agro-ecological cities for this session. I want to thank the local authorities who are here with me on the stage, and as well the ones who are participating, Mercocidades from the network of cities for agro-ecology. It's an honor to share this space here for collective analysis and generating a shared agenda for Latin America. We know that this joint workspaces allowed to develop and shed light on the potential for coordinated action amongst cities as protagonists close to the citizenry with innovative and dynamic approaches in the Milan Pact, with more than 200 cities around the world who work in a coordinated fashion on food policy, and I'm part of the network of municipalities for agro-ecology. I have more than 20 cities in various different places in Spain who work on food policy, and we, for cities for agro-ecology and other organizations, and the city government of Barcelona launched an international proposal with 24 countries from around the world. We have worked in sustainable and healthy food policy for climate action in Barcelona for good food and the climate, where in addition Belo Horizonte and Rosario in Argentina, two cities, key cities in Latin America, highly committed to food policy for climate action. We are here in Rio de Janeiro, the wonderful city, 30 years after the Earth Summit in Rio. International agreements were signed, which were fundamental for our recent history. We established sustainable development as a concept and catalyzed the drive for multi-level policies around the world. I want to highlight the agreement on biodiversity agreement, which was on the need for conserving biodiversity as part of development, and the Framework Convention of the United Nations on Climate Change, which was established the need to decrease greenhouse gas emissions, and which has been ratified by 197 different countries. Despite all of these milestones and other ones, today we're facing global challenges with a close relationship to food systems, and these are both the origin of and the source and the result of the impacts of emergencies have been listed. Some of them have been listed: the climate emergency, the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. Agriculture is part of this. It's very clear that before 2040, we will have achieved 1.5 degrees more in an increase in temperature. And even we don't know the origin of the pandemic. We know is correlated to the unsustainable administration of ecosystems and food systems and the management of them, and which triggered an unprecedented health crisis, which became a food emergencies, increasing the number of people going hungry in the world. War and armed conflicts, some of them with a heavy impact on the food systems at the global level. We have the war in Ukraine now, which has led to a problem of access and famine, increase in nitrogenous fertilizers and energy. All of these emergencies that we're confronting have a strong impact. Inflation, which was listed previously, inflation in the food system, increasing prices of foods based on financial speculation as well. The food systems are experiencing a complex situation of an uncertain future where global emergencies and connected and feed back into each other, and they connect to structural problems of the food systems themselves. The diagnosis will help us to have true solutions in the framework of the fair transition, proposing local solutions to these global challenges. We are in the space of cities, global cities, where we can see the social and economic and environmental impacts of the crises and crisis situations. The cities are not normal a space where they produce food, but it's where food is consumed. 70% of the foods that are produced in the world are consumed in cities, and they're places where cultural agendas are determined for food and diet. The cities have many different competences, but they can drive public policies as well in food, sustainable and healthy food with relevant impacts given the global emergencies. And I would like to launch and raise the first question now. These systems that we're building, we don't want to leave anyone behind. How can we advance climatically fair food systems? How can we guarantee equitable distribution, access to safe, nutritional, and sustainable foods in the context of global emergencies that we're experiencing now? And I would like to turn the floor over now to the mayor of Rosario. Perfect. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mayor. Good afternoon. As the mayor of Rosario takes the question by Maria is the key question. And it's, first of all, I want to greet everyone warmly. How to build climate justice with social justice, and how can we do it within the framework of the producing foods and food security, food sovereignty, and urban food. The region suffers a blight of inequality. Although we're the region, we're not the poorest region of the world, but we're the most unequal one. But with such great inequality, hunger and poverty grow, and we see a paradox. The region which produces food, or the capacity to produce food to supply the planet, but nevertheless has famine inside its own countries and societies. The gap of inequality has a heavy impact on food sovereignty, because obviously quality nutrition has a lot to do as well with access to goods which are increasingly expensive. And if we don't work on this gap and inequality in food sovereignty, it will be very difficult, because oftentimes what is sustainable is not affordable, and when it's affordable, it becomes unaffordable, and this gap and inequality increases even more. Food sovereignty, climate justice, and technological transformation and unequal distribution of resources all have to do with this issue of justice that Maria was discussing. Okay, in our understanding, the urgent agenda incorporates the issue of poverty, the indicators of malnutrition or poor nutrition. Oftentimes it's undernutrition, it's poor nutrition, because it's overnutrition and food waste, which is another major debate and an issue which I believe that we have to embrace the huge amount of food which we waste now. From the point of view of cities, which, as was said, the places where naturally they're not where the places where the agenda for consumption is defined. And yes, cities can even be places where food is produced, as Rosario. That's what we've proposed in Rosario, because, and it's a reflection which the pandemic raised. The pandemic valued closeness, proximity to food, to what we know, what we're used to knowing with what we're used to exchanging has a much more important value than prior to the pandemic. And this is a great opportunity and a challenge for cities. We consume, we purchase, we approach, do it not so much in the large spaces of consumption, rather in the closer spaces. During 2 years, we had limitations in mobility, but this heavily impacted our culture as well. And I believe that there we have a major opportunity, based on our experience, to contribute. This is a global debate which has a territorial scale. In our opinion, to empower our communities is key. And locating in the urban soil, in the street markets, and the logic all the way from production to marketing, and even some levels of industrialization, organic agriculture at the urban level. Experiences are based on this capillarity. The rural areas where the urban soil we dedicate to production of food, the possibility of in the belts around cities, talking about the green belt, which has to do with food sovereignty and the quality of the food, and also with the logic of distribution of these foods, where there's fair, close marketing of foods. This production needs to include sustainability. When this chain can have an impact on marketing, and that it be sustainable, these collective projects, and finding the issue of waste, food waste, and the markets of concentration, the waste also in industry, the food industry, the multiple logics that use the market system to throw away what should not be thrown away. It's in validation and expiration dates, which giving it greater market value to foods that we could take advantage of, rather than establishing abstract expiration dates. First, the pandemic forced us to work in coordinated fashion at the provincial level and at the municipal level, but also you do this with organizations, agriculture, agroforestry, when 1,600 homes with alternatives to feed people in the city, and which were key for the entire world to be able to eat in a situation that was so vulnerable as the pandemic. This system, this scheme, which I cite, was able to feed 300,000 people throughout the pandemic, about a year and a half, intensely.
This is a lesson learned for us. And we can do that with a focus on nutritional quality. What food, how to produce them. And then we have a lot of new challenges in terms of proteins, in terms of the impact from the point of view of healthcare, of malnutrition or poor nutrition. And also we wanted to, before COVID, we wanted to avoid the death of diabetic people, but then we generate a system that because of problems of food sovereignty and poor nutrition, we cause other problems. And we affect the healthcare with the same standard of inequalities of food production. So articulation, public-private, social, public-private. Secondly, continuity a long time. Our program for food agriculture and urban agriculture is 20 years old. We started actually 21 years old. 21 years ago, it gained more and more space in the urban soil. And third, it has to do with networks. And here, we base ourselves on the Milan Pact. We believe that global and regional problems can be solved if you address the cities. And as I said before, thinking globally, acting locally needs to become a reality. And it needs to be a reality at the time in which you negotiate what is being funded in the impacts of programs for climate actions. If we as cities cannot fight for more resources, for funds that will immediately reach the territory, for our green belts, resources for our organic vegetable gardens, so as to allow our people to produce food. We spoke about Rio and Belo Horizonte and all these cities that we have today, and so many experiences. Obviously, we will have very few possibilities of advancing in this area. And this construction of a horizontal pact of cities, as it needs to be done, will advance also in terms of a failure from the point of view of the vertical rationale, because by doing that, we failed. You cannot just sign a document. We do better when we collect experiences, when we share with each other, when we show as a network what has to be done, that there is nothing that is unattainable when we join forces. In Argentina, they used to say, the arena, sand is a little bit, but a mountain is made of sand sometimes. So this is the Milan Pact. We need to walk in that direction, and we do hope that our experience may be fed by other experiences. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Any reactions? Any comments? Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It is important that we speak about the Curitiba experience. Curitiba is the capital of the state of Paraná in the south of Brazil. And it is the center of 29 municipalities in the metropolitan area, with a total of 4 million people in the Curitiba greater area. Since '86, Curitiba has had a policy that has focused on the food programs, the Armazém da Família, the Sacolão, and other such programs. But in 2017, when we started working with the second food security program for the city, our challenge was to work on the legitimate demands of the population. And we brought in more than 80 players from civil society. Then we realized that the climate issue was a reality and different food demands were at stake. And we realized important issues that were essential for us to change our direction. The strategy established by the mayor, the strategy needed to be metropolitan because we have 34,000 family farmers in the surrounding area of Curitiba. They're based on underwater and 3 aquifers that are supplying these 4 million people. So sustainable models are essential. Something else that scared us was the fact that before the pandemic, we had 33,000 families below the line of poverty, 70% of the working population overweight and with low consumption of fruits and vegetables. And when we saw low consumption, we say 400 grams being the ideal recommended portion, daily portion, about 50% of that. So we also realized that in the population of children in the school age, in municipal schools, they had a high rate of obesity. So our first action in this plan was to turn the secretariat that was for supply, it became a food security secretariat. And then secondly, we tried to work the whole strategy based on a 4-pillar program. The third sector, the civil society, the government, and municipal institutions. Food security involves all these axes. The 3 branches, the 3 axes we worked on were basically working to fight food waste, trying to fight overweight children, and in 2017 we changed. So during the pandemic, we did not stop working. During the pandemic, ultra-processed food consumption increased. So we wanted to challenge the production model, the conventional production model, trying to understand the scenario of production based on underwater aquifers and the strong production in the urban area. So we had 3 strategic axes for work. And we realized that urban agriculture is a pivotal step in food security programs. We already had the food security program with the vegetable gardens, but without a strategic point of view. We have 155 vegetable gardens, school and community gardens. And it became a point of connection with communities, with the population at large, with institutions, working on nutritional and food education, working with the Secretariat of Education and Healthcare, working with the Health Ministry. They had a production surplus, so we worked on that. And the environmental point of view, the native bees, the production of composting, so vegetable gardens became a strategic axis for us. And then we need to work on other items. In the case of access, here, during the pandemic, this became more difficult with the homeless. So the Mesa Solidaria, Meals in Solidarity, works with the civil society. We have more than 80 institutions and churches working together with the municipality, increasing the supply to 400 meals for the homeless. And something that was really amazing is that those people who went to work to eat there was not just the homeless, it was the unemployed as well. That is why we needed to develop other actions: autonomy, independence, working on training, etc. And the third strategic line of work is to connect the common metropolitan market to family farming. So it is 3 strategic lines of work. And the pandemic did not surprise us because we were prepared. So now the challenge is to work on the food agenda strategically in the municipal government, so we can add and share solutions towards major challenge. Thank you so much. Well, hello, good afternoon. Well, undoubtedly, the mere fact that we are here is based on the quality of the speakers and the numbers of people in the audience. That proves already that the cities have taken on a leadership role in establishing agendas. And when I pay attention and go back to your opening speech, and if we think about the Earth Summit, we will be reminded of the fact that that was the first time in which cities were called to take on its role, its leadership role in Agenda 21. So very timidly it was called and to participate in the Brundtland report, and then it was called on again, and in '96 on the UN Habitat. That is when the cities were proposed as a challenge to public power. So who's going to talk about the cities globally? Everybody started to talk about the state and how cities are the most important forum for the discussion of populational issues in the modern age. And from that point onwards, the public government was given the big challenges with the MDGs and then the SDGs and with the Paris agreements. But certainly when the urgency of the climate change came to affect cities, posing such a major challenge where the government in its lack of resources, and that is the situation for all of us, that is when the public was called upon with this urgent request to face food security. And here we're called up to think about something else. Cities are created, they came to birth when the Industrial Revolution started. And we were always the spectators of what was being redefined at the time. And today, we are faced with a different dilemma, which is we are seeing deindustrialization. We need to maintain employability and provide social justice. If we stop to think about it, these are dilemmas that cannot be resolved. However, without social justice, there is no climate justice. It is impossible for you to discuss climate justice with someone who does not have anything, including food. So if you think about public government, and I'm talking on behalf of the Economic Development Secretariat, right? And if we consider that we need to think of the global agenda and how can it be reflected through public policies, promoting the development of territories that are lacking in services in almost all areas, that proves the importance of us being here. Belo Horizonte has always paid attention to this. At the beginning of the 90s, we created our community restaurant. And we are very proud of our staff, of our directors and technicians from the Secretariat of Food Security. So we've grown in that. You can have access to the details of the public policies in our city. But we are in the Alijecta Est, right? And our commitment to society is that you cannot advance in global agenda unless you face food security issues. Thank you so much for your contribution and for bringing again the history of the 30 years gone by since the Earth Summit. And now we see the urgency of our challenges. How can we ensure that transition is not only fair, but fast? We need to have political consensus, and however, that, well, it might take a while. So you have the floor now with that comment. Well, thank you so much, Maria. I'd like to thank all the colleagues. You cannot solve complex issues with an easy speech or with an easy discourse. We have several Brazilians here, and we know that Brazil was a rural country up until the 70s, and it rapidly migrated to the urban areas. And now 86% of Brazilians live in the cities. How are these cities? Who are they? It is several cities inside the same city. And inside this very city, we have cities where public services are not available. So if you talk about climate justice, its first fight is to fight poverty, because if someone has no access to sewage, they do not have legal access to electricity or water. If you talk to them about climate justice, they will say, well, now, wait a minute. So we have so many challenges. We would have several workshops here to solve that. We have been the signatory of the Pact of Milan since I was working in the municipality, and here I am, a mayor again. Well, we have a rural area that was bigger in the past, and it became rural-urban because of the urban areas, and now it's rural again. The city has 1.5 million inhabitants and 500 square kilometers. It is a very large area, but we have some experiences. First of all, the production of organics. Everything that is produced, 12% is organics. And they are street markets, and the city has 93 neighborhoods. But in the main neighborhoods, there are street markets offering good quality organic food at affordable prices. And we also have community vegetable gardens around. And like Curitiba, we have more than 300 schools in our network. And the schools, well, they are a beautiful space for education about nutrition. We have several examples. One of them, we were in a partnership with a local NGO and iClay and Google, and we put 2 biodigesters in the schools, and they were so successful that we're now launching a station for all public schools. And there were 2 byproducts. The gas is used for cooking in the kitchen for the school canteen, and it is also used for the vegetable garden. And the schools are in the suburbs. And these communities are bringing the rests of food to be processed in the biodigesters. And that will change the lives of communities. So professors, teachers, school staff, they're all being trained. We're making a big bet there. Like Rosario and Belo Horizonte said, we have 5 popular restaurants, and we serve about 1,000 meals a day. They're all in the hands of partners. We have no public community restaurant. So the experience of having agreements with partners, of making agreements, is excellent. In schools, in restaurants, community restaurants, you produce much better. And that is also valid for partners in churches, where they have church schools as well. Well, Brazil, as you know, has several Bolsa Familia, so many people who are benefited by the Bolsa Familia program, and you need to go one step forward, especially in the innovation sector. Brazil is so needy there, and it needs to make a big bet there. Well, I'm very happy to be here sharing our experiences. I know we don't have much time. Thank you.
We were together recently, but I wanted to raise several issues and the challenges when we were talking about climate justice and social justice, understanding this moment that we're living after the pandemic and the war in Ukraine and this entire backdrop for the world population with situations of confrontations. However, how can we engage in dialogue with people who are experiencing this situation? Brazil, for example, in 2022 is back on the map of hunger. There are countless people who've not experienced this before, and they don't even know what that means to be living in hunger. And many of these people are fighting social inequality. And how can we engage in dialogue in terms of 33 million people are going hungry? And what are the strategies to guarantee climate justice and social justice in confronting this situation? So there's no way, it's unthinkable to talk about these challenges without talking about the political agenda and political will and strategies and tools for us to be able to confront this situation. Can't talk about this without talking about investment in family farming and production of these foods. But none of this, all of it requires resources. It's important for us to think of financing for us to be able to deal with this context. So in my opinion, South America has a major challenge, as we've seen here this afternoon. We're talking about people concerning the situation, involving them in this leading this discussion, and people who act in confronting this situation, but also to discuss the importance of this political agenda, not only this afternoon, but this morning as well, and talk about the policy agenda and the financing agenda. People in the cities, the municipalities have to produce the response. That's where urban life happens. However, without any resources, how can we achieve all this? So I leave this food for thought here for us over the course of this meeting to move forward with strategies which give us this, at least the design for a response in the longer term. Thank you very much. Indeed. Now, Jacqueline de Araquara raises the issue of funding, how to fund these policies and to be implemented. And that's your question first with regard to scaling up. How can you guarantee scaling up the transformative initiatives that are being developed? How can we strengthen regionally the lessons learned? Which tools to be used to strengthen and implement? Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I come from Recife, the city government in Recife, which is a historical city, historically dealing with hunger ever since Josué de Castro, the famous nutritionist in the 1950s. In 2004, we held the conference, the Brazilian Conference on Food and Nutritional Security, in which, since we held this conference in 24, we have a food security plan with, and have for almost 20 years. We have community soup kitchens and community dining halls, which have worked for almost 20 years in this city, and which they've been able to scale up. What we're able to do was to guarantee some structure for some communities, but we weren't able to scale this up on a scale at the municipal level within a city with 1.5 million inhabitants. So when the current administration took office, we had a structure, we had a plan, a policy for food security, but we didn't have any kind of strategies for urban agriculture, especially because this city is completely urbanized. There are no rural areas in the city of Recife, and there's no policy for agriculture in the urban setting. And we realized in the current administration that it would be good to scale up and to discuss food security in a broader sense, that this food security plan and nutritional plan should also incorporate these strategies of urban agriculture. In the city of Recife, there's some organizations that do urban agriculture, which independently from the city government, they already work supporting some groups. And when we took over, there was an executive secretary for urban agriculture in Recife. The first strategy was to involve these existing groups and mobilizing them in the middle of the pandemic. Groups, organizations, departments that did activities to confront the situation of hunger, which is latent in Brazil, and Recife is part of all this. So the executive secretary of urban agriculture emerged from this to strengthen what was already being done and to increase the scale. So we have supported the community vegetable gardens, the institutional vegetable gardens, to support with composting the school vegetable gardens. And one of the things that we'd like to highlight, which has been cited by Curitiba as well, is the issue of education, how to strengthen from children up this debate on food security based on the production in schools themselves. We've expanded this initiative. Another strategy is important is for us to think that we're not alone. And I think that it's extremely important here to have this debate, to all be together here, reflecting strategically and collectively. And that's where this is a new secretariat, as I said. It's still not even 2 years old, but we're perhaps the youngest signatory to the Milan Pact. We signed it in October 2021, precisely because we realized that Recife can't do things alone. We had to engage in dialogue with other cities in Brazil and all around the planet. And for us, especially in the greater metropolitan Recife, as the mayor Porto Alegre said, and Curitiba said as well, the strategy has to be metropolitan. We have to have dialogue with the other municipalities, especially because since we don't have an urban area in the city, organic production, and we have 54 different street fairs in the city of Recife, and it's a metropolitan production, it's rural, and we had to discuss with them one of the strategies to gain scale is this dialogue between us as the city government and the metropolitan dialogue in the greater metropolitan area. Another key issue is planning. We realized that Recife had an old, well-organized plan with food security, but we have a plan for climate action. ICLE has been working with us in Recife. We have a carbon inventory with the map of vulnerabilities. We have a climate action plan. In climate action plan, some 20% of this plan deals with urban agriculture. And we, based on these existing plans in the city, we built a plan for agro-ecology, urban agro-ecology in the city of Recife. Based on this plan, we are building partnerships in dialogue to raise for fundraising and for development to guarantee the scale for it to be possible in the city. Good afternoon. I represent Sao Paulo. It's somewhat challenging in a context of a 10 million inhabitants city, like 20 million inhabitants with 20 million inhabitants in the greater metropolitan area. I listed 5 points that we've discussed in the last years to talk about climate justice and the fight against hunger, to see food systems and how they can be a path for this. I think that the opening session, all the points that I'm going to discuss here have already been mentioned. This is great because I think that we're well aligned. The first of them is political priority. The city government and its master plan, the first priority is to include the population in income transfer programs and nutritional support programs, acknowledging already, even before we got back onto the map of hunger, that this should be our main priority, but also we entered with a target, an objective of 400 urban vegetable gardens in this city. The city of São Paulo has a rural area, 30% of the territory in the southern part. Few people know this, and we have agriculture of all different kinds, peri-urban agriculture, urban agriculture, community school agriculture, institutional, with other political and public spaces. And from the point of view of governance, I am the director of agriculture for the city, and we have a new governance, which is agriculture plus food security, which I think is an interesting governance to work with food systems. I believe that, and the most important thing in political priority is having had this as a target, that for us to have budget resources for it. And even more important is for this target of 400 vegetable gardens, it came from civil society, and its contribution to political priority is also built by civil society as well. And in our city, this was extremely important. The second point concerning food insecurity is that we know that it is an issue of income, poverty in our population, and inequality, and the most common path is to wage on income transfer policies, but they are insufficient. More important still, in the Brazil, the strategy to eliminate hunger is the creation of jobs, which is extremely important, especially formal jobs. In the Pensan report, informal workers have greater risk of food insecurity. So formal jobs are extremely important, and increase in purchasing power of the minimum wage with inflation, the disposable income for food decreases. So real wage increases are important, and with the dilemmas that we're facing today. The third point here, which is close to my area, is to strengthen agriculture as a strategy, a multidimensional strategy. So all the way from its role, educational role of engagement in environmental education, but also environmental preservation and food production. And in the city of São Paulo, we have a clear wager to strengthen agriculture. We need for technical assistance, for rural extension services. We need people. Just as you can't do education without teachers, you can't strengthen agriculture without extension technicians who go repeatedly to support the farmers, both in practices, in assimilating technologies, and increasing productivity. Why? Because family farmers, they don't have enough income to pay for the extension services, and this historically created a gap, a bottleneck. I was going to say a gap, a bottleneck. I hate the words in English, sorry, for competitiveness between family and commercial farming. So to provide technical assistance is extremely important for us to be able to have family farming, be able to enter the market. And talking about scale, we had clear efforts in the last 5 years to promote the promotion to agroecology and organic farming, increase the number by 50%, the number of organic and agroecological farmers, offering technical assistance to them and allowing, promoting, fostering certification with inputs. But we realized that we reached a ceiling, and it's the scale, the issue of scale. We were able to do the transition of those farmers who like the idea, but we need to convince those who are well organized. They have conventional farming, and the transition for them is much more riskier. It's much riskier because they are moving towards a production model that they don't have any knowledge of. So technical assistance is important in that, but also we have been wagering on biological inputs and composting and so forth, and we can reflect on the bottleneck for scalability of organic farmers in Brazil as well. Another point is the markets. This is the third point, okay, to strengthen agriculture. It doesn't suffice to open up street markets for marketing spaces, because we need to allow this market for the farmers to access it. It's not very simple. You just open the street market, the number of farmers are going to come and sell, period. Okay, actually, it's a commercial relationship. It has to be feasible, happening once, happening a second time. It works and it continues. And farmers, when they're alone, in other words, not in cooperatives, it's difficult for them because they have to be the farmers, but they have to also do the logistics, they have market knowledge and organization relations, client relations. So we strengthen cooperative movements appears to be an important solution, even though for many farmers and many of them, cooperatives already knocked on their door, and for many of them, it was a traumatic experience. So we need to rebuild this cooperative movement's feasibility. So in a peri-urban zone, Graziano discussed in 2000, he did a study about the Brazilian rural areas, where rural areas close to the large cities, we have two different characteristics: low agricultural yields and the partial dedication of people. Because if farming, people do odd jobs rather than farming, happens a lot. Peri-urban farmers tend to be destructured, disorganized, because they don't work in the poverty. In poverty, they tend, in their activity, they do odd jobs and have farming, which is discontinuous. To round out here, the scale is indispensable. We're not going to solve everything in the city of São Paulo. We have 500 family farmers in the city of São Paulo. We can supply a large volume, relevant volume, but it's not going to even reach 5% of the urban market. The fourth point is the public purchases. It's a feasible strategy for the state to access the vulnerable population of the Brazilian state. It feeds 50 million people every day. The city of São Paulo has 1 million students in the municipal school system who eat 2 meals a day. There are 2 million meals a day. So this is a beginning that we need to wager on and support. The city government has advanced legislation. It's good for us to exchange positions to subsidize for organic and local food, for us to pay 30% more to them to supply the school food programs and to allow other markets as well. And social participation is indispensable. As I said before, if today we have a budget for agriculture, it was not myself as a technician who convinced people, but civil society who first allowed this agriculture to exist in the city, confronting resistance and persisting, showing the relevance of this agenda and mobilizing at a strategic moment. And the definition of priority setting in the city government, which is the agenda, an agenda item. You have political will, you have political prioritization. To conclude, the city of São Paulo has, beyond this issue of agriculture, it has a climate action plan, an agenda, 2030 agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. We're launching agro-ecology and urban development plan, and all these plans were built by social participation specifically. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. I am Carlos Quispes. I am the mayor of Huancayo. Huancayo, the most important city in the center of Peru. And this 8th Global Forum on food policy, I'd like to provide our experience on the work on food security. It started for us in 2019. That is when we did not have yet any social program that could improve the nutrition of school children. We would purchase native potatoes. We have more than 400 types of native potatoes. It is located at 3,500 meters above sea level. And it is an area which produces vegetables, potatoes, beef, fruits, almost all fruits. And Huancayo subsidizes, provides food to the capital of Peru, Lima. Much was said here about political will, and of course we do need political will. But the authority will never evaluate and assess problems as they are unless they have lived them. Not all authorities, not all leaders are agronomists or specialists. So how can they don't know about it? How can they assess it? They only realize that when they see it. Huancayo has more than 500,000 inhabitants, more than 45 districts. That is when you value the reality of your population, when you see it firsthand. We purchase directly from producers and farmers so as to improve the food of our school children. We started with 35 educational centers serving more than 4,000 students, but the gap is still significant. It is, certainly. Also, about global warming, the climate has changed so much. In Peru, we have ancestral habits and customs. The farmers would follow the phases of the moon, and they would also wait for the rains to help their harvest. After climate change, everything has changed. We, as a municipality, we are now promoting what is called the seeding and harvesting water. We are at the headwaters of rivers. We are planting ornamental and traditional plants that accumulate water. We have started that. There is a municipal ordinance so that all leaders will continue doing this in the future so as to attenuate and mitigate the water supply issues. Also, there is a lack of fertilizers. The national market is lacking those products. We're also promoting another project which has to do with the production of biol. Biol is a natural fertilizer. With that, we will provide organic production, organic farming. We're starting with a pilot project. We're starting with 2, and we hope to replicate that in other areas of the province of Huancayo, so they can all benefit from the production of biol and improve their soils. We also have popular vegetable gardens, community restaurants, and programs in the schools, in public schools. This is not the responsibility of municipalities alone. There must be a joint work between local, state, national governments, public and private institutions, and the grassroots, the organized civil society. I do thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to thank the whole technical team of FAO. They have encouraged us since the very beginning for the creation of this program back in 2019, and it's been very successful in Peru, so much so that about 15 cities have come to Huancayo to get to know how public expenditures, how public purchases are done, how children in school age are being benefited, and how we're cutting the intermediary, because they would purchase at 30, 40 cents the kilo the potatoes, and they will sell for 2, 3 soles. And the farmer sometimes does not even recover the investment. That's another gap to be closed. We're working strongly on this. Thank you so much for the invitation. Well, After hearing the comments of all of us from the panel, we realized that we as municipal staff, we are directly involved. And our problems are similar. I'm coming from Ecuador, from Chone. You are a much bigger country in terms of territory and population. Chone has 150,000 people and 7 butcher districts, and 7% is in the rural areas. We have been trying to get our farmers not to lose their ancestral traditional methods in farming. We're working with them in a program called Fincas Responsables. We're trying to get the production to be sustained. We are a very rich soil in citric fruits. We do produce a lot of mandarin and tangerines and oranges. And also cattle, beef cattle. We're big there. We're now fighting with a new project of regenerative cattle. We're now preparing our farmers in the rural area so they find a sustainable way of working on the cattle raising without affecting nature. We're also trying to recover the space lost in Chone with the cocoa producers, with fine aromas in the international market. We're trying to have the farmers go back to working on cocoa. And well, due to foreign policy, we could not maintain some programs. Also, we've been working on markets in the urban area, markets that were closed after the pandemic. Our urban population was affected, and through these markets that we have now created, we're taking organic products and creative products with a value-added amount to markets. We're also training them so they can get involved in new businesses. We have also involved our citizens. Leonardo Rodriguez, the engineer, is an engineer. He's our mayor, and he's thinking about this line of work. This is what we're all concerned with, the development of our cities, right? Hello, I am Diogo Caprio, coordinator of the Hortas Cariocas program in Rio de Janeiro. Different from other cities, in Rio de Janeiro, in our master plan, we had the agricultural production go out of the city. They are more than western area of the city, closer to this area where we are now, Barra da Tijuca. But after urban development, these productions were pushed further out. Most of our food is produced very far away from here, even outside the state of Rio de Janeiro. So the biggest problem, what we are focusing on now, is to recover these production spaces, especially in the urban voids that are in poor communities where there is extreme poverty, so we can rebuild these spaces and plant there. The density of our population, we're more than 6 million inhabitants in a territory that is full of mountains and hills. 30% of the area is preservation parks. We have the biggest urban park in the world. So that's our challenge, to reestablish these areas so that we can bring production back into the city, respecting the diversity of our city. Rio has people from different states of the country. For many years, it was the capital of the country. So that brought in a variety of problems. If you look at the master plan of Rio, you see there is a diversity of problems. So working here is even more challenging. I was listening to all your talks. You were talking about strengthening the production in areas. We have to find areas. We have to reestablish areas. In the current management, we're using new technologies. And the use of these new technologies is being applied inside the urban territory. If you talk about agricultural areas, cariocas, the local people, don't understand this. What? An agricultural carioca? No, there is no such thing, they would think. When the Olympic Games came here, the Olympic Park was built. We had a huge area there, and we had small farmers planting there. And the area, due to the needs for space in for the Olympic Games, they got rid of these people. They displaced these farmers. Now the municipality is giving this area back to these small farmers. We're reestablishing the future biggest urban vegetable garden in the world. It was not created through a project by our municipality. Actually, it was given back to the population because this area was the focal point of agricultural production for those 5 communities that are living around the Olympic Park. So we need to maintain these areas. We need to reestablish a strong agricultural economy, investing in technology, and not technology in the sense of chemical products or machinery. We are talking about areas that are densely populated, where we have poor communities, buildings that are of 5-story high, and a hill making access difficult. So we need to use technology, new forms of providing them with a perspective of how these highly densely settlements were built. Hydroponics, green roofs, aquaponics, strengthening the use of animal protein inside a food system. If you consider the organic production, that is very important so that our cities have a broad view of the future, benefiting these local communities. If you do not educate them, though, without inserting these new guidelines into our plan, we will not have a bright future. No, the microphone is not on. We cannot hear. We cannot hear. The microphone is not on.
No? Ahora? No. Ahora sí, ¿no?
Okay, now we can hear. Okay, I was saying that we are now closing. We are totally out of our schedule. Now, some final comments. As a final reflection, please, let's try and incorporate those that are virtually participating. Carlos Correa from Manizales and Martín Pérez from Rio Grande. Can you join us, please?
Yo soy el secretario de Desarrollo Económico y Ambiente de Rio Grande. La verdad que estuvimos escuchando atentamente todas las ponencias. La verdad nos sentimos muy honrados.
We don't have sound in the translation booths.
En particular de este panel. Y viendo un poco que las problemáticas y los desafíos.
We cannot hear. We do not have sound in the translation booths.
Hola.
Oh, ay, hola, hola. Hola, perdón.
¿Está escuchando ahora?
Sí, sí, perfectamente, disculpe.
Bueno, cómo no, bueno, primero no sé si se había escuchado, pero realmente mandar un saludo a todos y a todas. Realmente es un honor participar de este foro, de esta cumbre, de este panel. Y bueno, un poco decía que las problemáticas y los desafíos que cada uno los panelistas comentaron son muy comunes a todas las ciudades, ¿verdad? Independientemente de las características de cada uno. Nosotros somos una ciudad pequeña, una ciudad de 120.000 habitantes, situada en el extremo sur del continente y cuyo clima no tiene nada que ver por ahí con el clima de Río de Janeiro y con la población de Río de Janeiro, que ahí estaba escuchando.
Porque parece que el sonido es como sucio, ¿verdad? Un poco. Es que se oye con mucho eco.
Actually, in the booth, there is no sound, absolutely no sound in the booth. We don't hear anything.
¿Se escucha mejor?
Sí, que no lo están oyendo. No sé si esto se puede solucionar. ¿Sí? Vale.
Hola.
Sí,
continúe.
Continúe. No se le va a traducir en algunos idiomas, pero continúe,
Perfecto.
claro, en castellano.
Bueno, y entonces, bueno, viendo algunas problemáticas de una ciudad como Río, nosotros de la misma manera no consumimos casi todos los alimentos que vienen de afuera. Eso ha sido una situación en particular que en la pandemia cobró mucha relevancia, afectando y comprometiendo seriamente la alimentación de todos los riograndenses. Así que en ese sentido también llevamos adelante programas de fortalecimiento a la producción local, sobre todo la producción de alimentos de proteína animal. Y llevamos adelante programas muy importantes desde el municipio en ese sentido, y también teniendo un poco lo que se habló de que tiene que ver con la justicia climática, ¿verdad? Con estas políticas que tienen que ver con la inclusión, con las perspectivas de género, con la participación ciudadana, fortaleciendo principalmente
cooperative systems and the association of farmers and producers so as to help scale up local production.
Agrícola bajo techo, por lo que es el clima de nuestra ciudad, y que por ahí cuesta un poco más, pero nos hemos puesto ese objetivo hace 3 años cuando iniciamos la gestión, y hoy podemos decir con orgullo que desde los programas municipales hemos más que duplicado la cantidad de productores y sobre todo de producción, pasando, por ejemplo, del 4% del consumo local de lechuga al 20% en 3 años.
Consumption of lettuce, we went up to 20% consumption of local lettuce. So we've been subsidizing and assisting financially and technically local producers. We believe that's the way, that's the right way. We local governments should get more involved. If we are closer to local producers, we'll be able to strengthen these policies.
La producción local de alimentos están absolutamente relacionadas con el cuidado del ambiente, el cambio climático. En particular, nosotros estamos a más de 3.000 kilómetros de distancia de los centros de aprovisionamiento de esos dos alimentos que vienen por vía terrestre. Entonces, sin ninguna duda, aumentando, reemplazando esos alimentos por alimentos locales, por supuesto, estamos contribuyendo a disminuir la emisión de gases de efecto invernadero y todo lo que tiene que ver con los programas de
greenhouse gas emissions, and you will not damage the environment so much. These are challenges that we all must face, irrespective of the size of our municipality and where we are located. It is nice to be here together so we can share opinions and find common solutions together. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Special greetings. I don't know if you can hear me with a considerable echo. Greetings from Manizales, Colombia, a city 100 meters above sea levels, 400,000 inhabitants, where 93% of the territory is rural. We have 67 territories where 29 million inhabitants live. Nevertheless, the pandemic led us to reflect, to reinvent situations all across the world. And that's how we in Manizales, in order to give provide a solution for the issue that we had of confinement, social isolation. So our communities, with the purpose of providing support for mitigating the climate change, we designed a strategy for urban agriculture, a strategy which is part of our Manizales master plan. We have the goal to establish in the 12 neighborhoods in our city or boroughs at least one community vegetable garden in each borough or large neighborhood. We already have 125 vegetable gardens, individual gardens, institutional gardens, vegetable gardens, which have some 400,000 people involved. But we're not going to have this reach duration over time or last over time if we don't include as public policies for it. That's why through a process of joint work, collaboration with academia, the universities, we are designing the first public policy for urban agriculture in Colombia. Brazil doesn't have any. This will be the first such organization. Manizales is a reference for urban agriculture in Colombia, and we've already had a visit by Rosario from Argentina with collaboration with Rosario in Argentina, where we're going to learn a lot from them, and they will have some knowledge about other programs around our region, these processes of urban agriculture that we have today, which without a doubt produce social, economic, and environmental benefits. So we want to protect people with this public policy, be the sustainable development process that we want, with the benefits that we seek. In addition, when we talk about climate justice, it's all the solutions that the governments have to propose to decrease the social problems resulting from climate change. In climate justice, we've implemented our climate action plan for the year 2050, which we call an Acting for the Planet, which has 8 strategic lines. In each of these 8 lines, there are activities to develop and some targets in the short, medium, and long term, where we, by 2050, will have 92% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions, reaching almost carbon neutrality. I believe that all of these strategies, which are developed globally through these institutions and through all the agreements and the pacts that we are involved in, that we want to thank you through the Milan Pact as one of the few cities in Colombia that's part of the Milan Pact. I think it is the path to follow for our planet to be a more sustainable, a greener planet, more inclusive, where one of the principal pillars is the development of healthy food, balanced diet, where governments have a crucial role, and where the cities, without a shadow of a doubt, and the territories, the urban territories, have a crucial role in food production. So special greetings from Colombia, and thank you for the invitation. Fine, we've reached the end of this session, and I would like to invite Rafael Sabana from FAO Brazil to be able to share with us a few final thoughts. Thank you very much, Maria. It's difficult after all this background of experiences, city experiences, to talk about the conclusions. Very briefly, I would like to offer three thoughts. One concerning the new focuses, another is concerns new actors or stakeholders, players, and the lessons from the pandemic. Finally, lessons, positive lessons from the pandemic. First, I love to hear that 30 years ago we were in Rio de Janeiro in the Earth Summit. I was about studying animal husbandry in Mexico, and with a thesis on urban agriculture. It was something very exotic, and to talk about urban agriculture sounded very exotic. It's clear to me that there is a different focus now. Okay, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the focus of the systems, food systems, were based on production. It was a totally sector-based focus. The ministries of agriculture were reflected the corporate interests of the farmers in the respective countries, even in the congresses, the rural caucuses, the farm caucuses were powerful, were extremely powerful. They still are in several different countries, but we're already moving towards a new focus, no longer focused on production, rather production focused on consumers. If we take a sweeping look at the analysis of the food systems in the last 50 years, we'll realize that based on the 21st, starting in the 21st century, we've been moving towards this analysis of the food systems based on consumers. And it's great that this is happening, because this month we are precisely reaching the 8 billion inhabitants in the planet. And of the 8 billion inhabitants in the planet, somewhat less than 7 billion live in cities, and that is precisely why we need to focus on the urban food systems based on consumers. We should talk briefly about new players. And new player, well, a player which is not exactly new, but in terms of climate change, okay, which is a player of the century, for example, but new farmers are urban farmers, of course, and closely linked to it is in the case in Brazil. It's not a new player. School food programs, but the vast majority of the countries, it is still a new player, especially from the perspective of school feeding, not from a perspective of the assistance, school packages or school ultra-processed food in most cases. So school food and urban farmers are new players in this focus based on consumers. It's music to the ears of all the lovers of agro-ecology and organic products to hear that cities, large and small and medium-sized cities, have their action plans and climate action plans and food security systems based on agro-ecological production, urban vegetable gardens, because all of these are great news. All of this is great news and a clear result of this change from a vertical focus to a more horizontal focus approach. And this horizontal approaches, that's what we're talking about another moment. These networks of cities, which in most of the cases should serve to shorten the learning curves, that not to repeat or replicate the experiences, but to adapt them and adjust them to our realities. And the result of these network of exchange of experiences, it takes less work to reach, as people say here, success, okay? Precisely to the success of the processes. Now, with these new players and new focuses, that we should not forget that we've gone through a pandemic, which cannot go back to business as usual as before. We have to learn from or based on what we've suffered and from what we've learned, of course, and highlighting the concept of proximity. Our friend from Rosario mentioned this proximity, greater coordination, the effects of the pandemic and poor nutrition and the reality in Latin America. Obesity and malnutrition go hand in hand. The importance of networks of integration with civil society generated, and this is one of the last messages that I want to do. We generated a scheme of more solidarity in our societies, okay? And I believe that this is one of the greatest results or outcomes from the pandemic in terms of living amongst in humankind. They prioritize healthier foods thanks to the pandemic, and also the closer foods, of course, with the consequent decrease in the carbon footprint from food. We have more conscientious consumers, not only more conscientious and with more solidarity. So I believe that a major lesson from the pandemic that we have is a society with greater solidarity, and this is what we need: more solidarity, more commitment, and less inequality, with zero hunger in the countryside and in the city. And we'll talk about climate change. Right. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rafael. Great. We've reached the end. Thank you very much to all the people who were responsible for the city governments and participating in person and remotely, sharing our reflections and actions. I believe this session has been very enriching and very diverse, and I believe that it's contributed to strengthening and coordinating the transition to sustainable and healthy food systems in our municipalities. And that's what I've loved listening to all of you on this note. Thank you very much.
Hola. Bueno, simplemente finalizar. ¿Se pueden sacar una foto? ¿Se pueden poner todos juntos para sacar una foto? Agradecer a todos.
I'd like to thank everyone. And now we are closing the regional forum in South America. Can you stand, please, so we can take a group picture?